Good morning, Australia! Children bubble with wonder and excitement. They aspire to be something great and to make a positive difference in the world. But so often we see as time passes, our realization of being able to reach for the stars becomes nothing more than a fleeting dream. How does education impact our opportunities for a prosperous future, and is change necessary? My name is Craig, and this is my educational philosophy. Over to my co-host Jenny. In his last moments of life, Brazilian philosopher Paulo Freire said in an interview, "My philosophical conviction is that we did not come to keep the world as it is. We came in the world in order to remake the world. We have to change it." Education promotes social reproduction by absorbing the younger generations into the present system. In addition, exposure to mainstream resources attributes to the development and maintaining of the dominant culture. As we grow older, many of us follow a narrow path through life that is devoid of critical thinking and imagination. Our values tend to revolve around the destination and not the journey. Craig. The world is changing at an accelerating rate. Take a moment to think about how the advancements in technology has shaped our society, how it has changed the dynamics within the family and classroom. That is why I believe that teaching should foster transformative pedagogies. I don't mean that traditional pedagogies should be abandoned altogether, rather that transformative pedagogies are absorbed into traditional educational practices to incorporate a holistic educational approach. Transformation begins with our ability to critically think. Critical thinking encourages a broader and more complex analysis of a problem and helps guide us to a more logical conclusion. It requires the individual to consider alternative options and perspectives and how our decisions affect others. In a classroom, the teacher is an authority figure with the power to influence the educational experience of their students. The teacher can address the imbalance of power by adopting a more teacher-student shared learning approach that teachers and students can learn from one another. The values, ideas, and lived experiences of students are brought into the classroom for collaborative learning and social engagement. A community within the classroom is developed, enhancing skills and building social capital. Furthermore, students begin to think critically as they acquire a more complex understanding of the real world. Jenny. Ooh, that's gotta hurt. American-Canadian scholar and philosopher Henry Thoreau agrees with the notion that education should be transformative. Students' own sense of agency is limited. For instance, we often see pedagogies that teach for the test, pedagogies that are simply about accountability, objective standards, and in no way take into consideration the experience of students. Education by design diminishes the ability for students to think critically and to be consciously aware of their own identity and cultural capital. Students are conditioned to believe that academic success is inextricably linked to future financial stability and that being rich gives life meaning and purpose. Media operates covertly to support this narrative by idolizing the rich and famous and thus constructing social barriers between those with economic and cultural capital and those without, leading to discrimination against those whom we don't identify with. Craig. Thanks, Jenny. Teachers are cultural workers that provide education that can complement the traditional paradigm, or they can reconstruct the classroom environment by empowering students to think critically and make their own decisions. Students should be taught that normalization is not normal, that difference is not inherently bad, and should be embraced with learning potential. The world operates because of difference. If we were all the same, then nothing would change for the benefit of society. Traditionally, the youth have had limited power and limited ability to make important decisions in the real world. Transformative pedagogy is directed at giving students a voice and the ability to make their own decisions, challenges the current hegemonic power that governs our curriculum. Rather than guiding students down a narrow path of social reproduction, transformative pedagogies help students to discover their own identity and belonging in the world. As a teacher, I want to give my students the greatest possibility of having a bright and fulfilling future. I will demonstrate justice by treating my students fairly and equally, and encourage them to express their voice, ideas, and experiences with the class. I acknowledge that learning is an ongoing process and that students and teachers alike can learn from each other to enhance cultural, social, and academic knowledge and understanding. I endeavour to educate students on the importance of critical thinking to foster logical decision-making that supports individual growth. Finally, I will demonstrate dignity by teaching students that differences should be embraced instead of condemned. Cultural identities should be acknowledged with respect and compassion. After all, it is our unique differences that provide opportunities for learning and growth. Thank you, and good night, Australia.